When my 6-year-old son called me at midnight, sobbing so hard he could barely breathe, I thought it was a nightmare, until he whispered, "Mom, Uncle Bram hit me." What came after shattered my family in ways I never imagined. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Avon Hale. I'm a single mom who works long hours, trying to keep life steady for my little boy, Milo. That night started like any other late shift. I had been called in at the last minute because a coworker got sick, and I didn't have time to find a sitter. My older brother, Bram, lived 20 minutes away, and even though our relationship was always rough, I still believed he was trying to be better. He had a long history of temper issues, but he always promised he was working on himself. I wanted to believe him, so when I called and asked if he could watch Milo for a few hours, he agreed without hesitation. I dropped Milo off with a small bag of snacks, pajamas, and his favorite toy car. He seemed excited, and I tried to ignore the tight feeling in my chest. I told myself that Bram would handle it. He was family. He wouldn't let anything happen to my son. I kissed Milo, thanked Bram, and rushed to work before I was late. Hours later, the call came. The moment I answered, all I heard was Milo crying. His breath was shaking, and I had to repeat his name 3 times before he finally spoke. He said he had woken up thirsty and asked Bram for water. Instead of helping him, Bram hit him. He whispered it like he was scared to say it louder. My whole body went cold. I left work without thinking, grabbed my bag, and ran to my car. The drive felt endless, every red light hitting at the worst time. I kept picturing Milo's face, his little hands, the fear in his voice. When I reached Bram's house and rushed inside, Milo was standing near the hallway with a red, swollen mark on his cheek. His eyes were puffy from crying. Bram was behind him, arms crossed, telling me Milo made it up and was acting out. His voice was flat, almost bored, like none of it mattered. Seeing him stand there without a trace of regret snapped something inside me. I picked Milo up and held him tight. He clung to me, shaking, and that was all the proof I needed. I didn't argue. I didn't look back. I carried my son out the door and walked straight to my car, knowing nothing would ever be the same after that night. Growing up with Bram was never easy for him. Even as kids, he reacted to the smallest things with anger. If a game didn't go his way, he threw it across the room. If someone disagreed with him, he took it as an insult. Our parents always said he was sensitive, but I knew it was more than that. Living under the same roof meant learning how to move quietly, choosing words carefully, and trying not to set him off. I spent most of my childhood stepping around his moods, hoping he wouldn't explode over something harmless. As we got older, nothing about him truly changed. He didn't get help, didn't slow down, and didn't work on the issues people begged him to face. Instead, he switched jobs constantly, argued with anyone who tried to correct him, and pulled away from friends who called out his behavior. Still, he had moments when he acted calm, like he wanted people to believe he could control himself. Those moments were rare, but they made it easy for others to pretend everything was fine. I guess I wanted to believe it too. Even after I became a mother, that old fear never fully left me. I kept my distance from Bram, not because I hated him, but because I didn't trust what he might do when he felt stressed or annoyed. But family ties can be complicated. When people grow up hearing, "He's your brother, you should help him," it becomes hard to step away completely. I tried to set boundaries, even though he didn't like them. I stayed polite, stayed careful, and stayed hoping he would finally get himself together. The night I needed someone to watch Milo, everything felt rushed. My shift changed suddenly, and I didn't have time to call around for a sitter. My closest neighbor was out of town, and the one friend who usually helped had her own emergency. I stared at my phone, scrolling through names, feeling that sinking pressure in my chest as minutes passed. I didn't want to call Bram, but I couldn't leave Milo alone. When I finally dialed his number, I did it with a knot in my stomach. Bram sounded almost cheerful when he answered, which surprised me. I explained the situation and told him I only needed a few hours. He said he could handle it. Something in his voice made me pause, but I pushed the doubt away. I reminded myself he was family. I reminded myself he could at least manage a quiet night with a child who rarely caused trouble. I drove Milo over because I felt I had no other choice. I told myself this time might be different. Maybe he would prove he had grown up. Maybe he would show me he could be trusted. I had no idea how wrong I was. The hours at work felt slow, but nothing prepared me for what happened. I was sorting paperwork when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't expect a call that late, so when I saw Milo's name on the screen, my stomach dropped. It was 12:07 a.m. I answered right away, already sensing something was wrong. The moment the call connected, I didn't hear words, only the sound of my child crying so hard he couldn't breathe right. I said his name again and again, trying to steady my voice even though fear rushed up my spine. His sobs were sharp, broken, like he was trying to speak but couldn't get the words out. I moved to the hallway at work, pressing the phone closer to my ear, whispering that I was there, that he was safe, that he needed to slow down and tell me what happened. After a long moment, I finally heard his voice. It was thin and shaking. He told me he had gotten up because his throat felt dry and he wanted water. He said he walked quietly so he wouldn't disturb anyone. Then, with his voice trembling, he said Bram struck him. He didn't know why. He didn't understand. He kept saying he didn't do anything wrong. Hearing those words felt like someone reached into my chest and squeezed until I couldn't breathe. My legs went weak, and I had to lean against the wall so I wouldn't collapse. I asked him where he was, if he could still see Bram, if he was hurt anywhere else. His answers came between shaky breaths. He said he was in the hallway, alone, scared, unsure if Bram would come back. I didn't think. I told him I was coming. I told him to stay where he was, not to move, not to say anything to Bram, and to wait for me. I could hear him trying to stop crying long enough to listen. I promised him I was almost there, even though I still had a full drive ahead of me. I rushed back inside the building, told my supervisor I had an emergency, grabbed my things, and ran to my car. My hands were shaking so badly that it took me 2 tries to get the key into the ignition. The moment the engine started, I pulled out of the parking lot faster than I should have, praying I wouldn't hit a red light. The road felt endless. My heart pounded with every second. I kept hearing Milo's voice in my head, small, scared, confused. I held the wheel so tightly my fingers cramped. All I could think about was reaching him, holding him, and taking him away from anyone who could hurt him again. When I pulled into Bram's driveway, I didn't bother turning off the engine all the way. I threw the door open and rushed to the porch, my pulse beating so loud it felt like it filled my ear. The house lights were still on, and the moment I stepped inside, I saw Milo standing near the hallway, silent, small, and shaking. His cheek was bright red and swollen, the mark standing out sharply against his skin. That sight froze me for a second before everything inside me snapped forward like a wave. I went straight to him, kneeling so I could look him in the eyes. He tried to speak, but his voice broke as soon as he opened his mouth. I placed my hand gently near his cheek, but didn't touch the bruise, afraid of hurting him more. I whispered that he was coming home with me, and he clung to my arm in a way that told me he had been waiting for me to show up since the moment he called. Before I could stand up, Bram walked into the room, moving casually, like nothing unusual had happened. He didn't look surprised to see me there. In fact, he had a bored expression on his face, like I had interrupted something insignificant. He crossed his arms and said Milo had lied, that he was acting out, that I always spoiled him. His tone wasn't angry or defensive. It was empty, flat, like he didn't care one bit about the child he had scared. Hearing him speak like that sent a wave through my chest I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just anger. It was every buried moment from our childhood rising up at once. All the times he blamed others for things he did. All the times he hurt people and shrugged it off. All the times I stayed quiet because I didn't want to set him off. Standing there in his living room, with my son trembling next to me, those memories crashed into me so hard I had to grip the edge of the wall to steady myself. I asked him why Milo's face was swollen. He shrugged. He didn't even look at Milo. He kept insisting the story wasn't true, that I was overreacting. His voice was cold, like he was already tired of the conversation. He didn't try to explain, didn't show regret, didn't ask if Milo was okay. He just kept talking in that flat tone, like none of this mattered. That was the moment something shifted in me. Every bit of doubt, every excuse I had ever made for him disappeared. I didn't argue with him. I didn't raise my voice. I just picked up Milo, held him close, and walked out the door. I didn't look back, because I knew if I did, I would see the same expression Bram had worn his whole life. Nothing. I carried Milo out of the house with one arm wrapped tightly around him, his small hands gripping the fabric of my shirt like he was scared I might slip away. The night air felt cold on my face, but I barely noticed it. All I could think about was getting him away from that. I reached my car and opened the back door, helping him into the seat as gently as I could. His eyes stayed on me the whole time, wide and afraid, like he was waiting for something else to go wrong. Just as I closed the door, I heard footsteps behind me. Bram stormed out of the house, shouting my name like he was the one who had been wrong. His voice cut through the quiet neighborhood, loud and sharp. He accused me of being ungrateful, dramatic, too soft. He said I always turned against him, that I never gave him credit for trying. His words came so fast they tangled together, fueled by a frustration he didn't even try to hide. I didn't answer him. I didn't trust myself to speak. I just moved around the car and reached for the driver's door. But Bram kept going, stepping closer, raising his voice as if volume could erase what he had done. He threw out insults I hadn't heard in years, the same ones he used on me when we were kids. Hearing them again brought back memories so fast they almost felt physical. I remembered standing in our old backyard, trying to play quietly, and him knocking things out of my hands just to watch me cry. I remembered him blaming me for broken toys, spilled drinks, torn books, anything he didn't want to take responsibility for. I remembered our parents brushing it off, telling me he didn't mean it, telling me I should be patient, telling me I needed to keep the peace because he had a harder time than I did. Those excuses had followed me into adulthood. Even when he acted out, even when he hurt people, someone always stepped in to protect him from consequences. I had carried that pattern for years without realizing it. I kept giving him the benefit of the doubt, hoping he would change, hoping he would grow up and finally understand the harm he caused. But watching him stand there in the driveway, yelling while my child sat crying in the back seat, snapped something loose inside me. This wasn't a brother who had made a mistake. This was someone who had been allowed to act without accountability for far too long. I opened my car door and looked at him one last time. I didn't shout back. I didn't argue. I just told him he would never be near my son again. My voice was steady, stronger than it had ever been with him. Then I got into the car, shut the door, and drove away, leaving his shouting behind me like a door that had finally slammed shut. The drive to urgent care felt heavy, like every mile carried a new weight on my chest. Milo sat in the back seat, quiet, holding a small blanket I kept in the car. He didn't look out the window. He didn't speak. He just held the blanket close, his cheeks still swollen. I kept checking the mirror, trying to catch his eyes so he would know I was here, but he stayed curled toward the door, exhausted and shaken. When we walked into the clinic, the bright lights made the bruise on his face stand out even more. The nurse at the desk took one look at him and brought us into a room without asking many questions. I sat next to Milo on the exam table, holding his hand while he swung his feet nervously. He didn't want to lie down, so I lifted him onto my lap, trying to keep him steady as the doctor entered. The doctor spoke softly, asking Milo a few simple questions. Where it hurt, if anything else felt sore, if he remembered exactly what happened. Milo answered in short whispers, barely lifting his eyes from his hand. The doctor nodded, taking notes, examining the mark with careful fingers so he wouldn't cause more pain. After a few minutes, he asked if he could speak with me privately. Milo stayed on the table, wrapped in a small blanket the nurse had given him. I stepped into the hallway, and the doctor closed the door behind us. His face changed the second we were alone. The gentle expression faded, replaced by something grave. He told me the mark on Milo's cheek wasn't accidental. He said the shape and depth showed clear impact from an adult hand. He said the force behind it was strong enough to leave lasting swelling, and that the redness would likely turn darker by morning. Hearing that confirmed what I already knew deep down, but hearing it from a professional made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't hide. Rage rose first, sharp, fast, almost dizzying. But beneath it came guilt, thick and heavy. I had handed my child to someone I knew had a long history of losing control. I had convinced myself he would be different this time, even though every part of my past warned me not to trust him. And then came heartbreak. Seeing my little boy in a medical room, because of someone who shared my blood, felt like something cracked open inside me. The doctor told me everything would be documented, and that the report could support anything I chose to pursue. I thanked him, even though my voice barely came out. When I went back into the room, Milo reached for me, tired and scared. I held him close and knew, without hesitation, that this wouldn't end here. Protecting him wasn't enough anymore. I would make sure Bram never had the chance to hurt anyone again. After leaving urgent care, I sat in the parking lot with Milo asleep against my shoulder. The clinic lights glowed behind us, and the quiet of the night felt heavier than before. I knew I couldn't rely on family to help. They had defended Bram too many times. I needed someone who would listen, someone who understood danger when he saw it. That's when I thought of Seth Murdoch. Seth had been close to my father for years, long before my father passed. When I was younger, he used to stop by our house for coffee, always in uniform, always calm. He saw things my parents ignored. He never said it out loud, but I could tell he sensed something off about Bram even back then. After my father died, he kept his distance, not wanting to interfere in family matters, but he never forgot us. I called him, my voice trembling. He answered right away, and as soon as he heard the strain in my tone, he asked where I was. Within minutes, he met me in the parking lot, still wearing an old sheriff jacket, even though he had retired years earlier. When he saw Milo sleeping with a bruise on his face, his jaw tightened in a way I had never seen before. We talked beside my car while Milo rested. I told him everything, the late-night call, the mark on Milo's cheek, Bram's reaction, the medical exam. Seth listened without interrupting, his arms folded, his eyes staying sharp and focused. When I finished, he nodded once and said we were going to do this the right way. No hesitation, no doubt. He guided me to the nearest station that handled after-hours reporting. Inside, he helped me organize every detail, making sure nothing was missed. He spoke to the officers like someone who understood the system inside and out. He insisted we include the doctor's comments, the time of the call, the swelling, every moment that showed what Milo had been through. The officers took it seriously, especially once they recognized Seth's name. While they processed the report, Seth pulled up information on Bram. I didn't expect what he found. Over the years, several roommates had filed complaints against Bram. Noise disturbances, threats, small assaults, property damage. None of it ever made it far because Bram moved constantly, slipping out of situations before consequences caught up to him. Seeing that list made my stomach twist. He had been hurting people long before he hurt my son, and I had no idea. Seth placed a hand on my shoulder and told me not to blame myself, but the guilt still sat heavy inside me. Still, as we finished the paperwork, something new began to form: determination. If Bram had escaped responsibility for years, that ended now. With everything documented and Seth guiding each step, I felt a strength I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing, and I wasn't going to stop until every truth about him came to light. By the next morning, I knew I had to tell my family before they heard it from someone else. I wasn't expecting support, but I hoped they would at least listen. Milo sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket while I made the call. My mother picked up on the second ring, her voice bright at first, then shifting when she sensed something was wrong. I told her calmly what had happened, what the doctor confirmed, what the report included, what Bram had done. There was a long pause, then a sigh I knew too well. She said I was overreacting, that children bruise easily, that maybe Milo had frightened himself and made the situation sound worse. She used the same tired excuses she had used my entire life, brushing off behavior that had gone far beyond normal. When I told her the doctor's findings, she said doctors always assume the worst. When I mentioned the report, she said involving law enforcement would tear this family apart. I felt the phone grow warm in my hand, but her words kept coming. She said Bram had a rough life, and that I should show more compassion. Before I could respond, she said she would conference in my sister, Kinley, because she's level-headed. I didn't want the call to grow, but my mother had already added her, and suddenly I was explaining everything again. Kinley didn't even let me finish. She said I was making a mess out of nothing, that Bram told her a completely different story. She claimed he said Milo had thrown a tantrum and hit himself by accident. Hearing her say that made something inside me twist. I told her that was impossible, that the doctor confirmed adult force. She didn't care. She said Bram was trying his best, and I needed to stop attacking him. I kept hearing the same words: dramatic, sensitive, destructive, ungrateful. They weren't talking about Milo. They were talking about me. The same labels they used when I was a child, when I tried to stand up for myself, when I tried to protect my own peace. I realized in that moment they never wanted the truth. They just wanted quiet. They wanted me to fall back into the role they had written for me: silent, forgiving, accommodating. While they kept arguing, Milo walked into the room, drawn by the sound of my mother's raised voice through the speaker. He heard them defending the man who struck him. His face crumpled, and tears rolled down his bruised cheek. He grabbed my hand, shaking, asking why Grandma and Aunt Kinley were saying those things. Hearing that broke something inside me that I didn't even know was still fragile. I told them the call was over. Before either of them could respond, I ended it. I pulled Milo close, holding him until his breathing slowed. Their betrayal hurt more deeply than I expected, but it also cleared the last bit of doubt lingering in my mind. I didn't just need to protect my son from Bram. I needed to protect him from everyone who chose to excuse the harm he caused. My resolve hardened in a way that felt final. I was done letting anyone minimize what happened. I was done being quiet. Avon moved forward without hesitation. She submitted every report, every photograph, every statement Seth helped her prepare. When officers arrived for Bram, he looked stunned, as if consequences had never applied to him. His arrest for child endangerment and assault sent a ripple through the entire community. In the hearing room, Avon sat with Milo's small hand in hers while the prosecutor laid out Bram's hidden past. Former roommates described violent outbursts he had buried for years. Medical documents confirmed the force behind Milo's injury. Each detail stripped away the image Bram had used to fool everyone around him. The judge listened carefully, then granted a protective order for both Avon and Milo. Bram tried to argue, but every word only exposed more of his history. The court rejected his pleas. His employer terminated him immediately, citing conduct that violated every policy they had. His reputation collapsed in a single afternoon, leaving him with nothing to hide behind. News of the hearing spread, and the same relatives who dismissed Avon began whispering apologies. But she didn't respond. They had chosen their side when Milo needed them most. Now, they simply watched the truth stand on its own, undeniable and final. Avon found a small apartment near the coast, the kind where the air smelled of salt and the mornings brought sunlight over the wave. Milo ran through the rooms, laughing softly as he explored, his bruises fading, his fear slowly replaced by curiosity and joy. She enrolled him in therapy, where a gentle counselor helped him put words to what had happened. Each session brought small victories, short smiles, calmer nights, a stronger sense of safety. Watching him grow lighter day by day, Avon felt the weight of the past begin to lift. At night, she stood by the window, listening to the ocean and thinking about everything that had led her here. Family betrayal cut deeper than she could have imagined, leaving scars she still carried. But she realized that love for her son mattered more than any blood tie. Avon held Milo close, feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest. For the first time in years, she felt certain she had made the right choice. She hadn't abandoned loyalty. She had chosen life, protection, and truth. Peace settled in slowly, like the tide creeping onto the shore, and for the first time, she knew they were safe, together, and finally free. Do you think I did the right thing by standing up to Bram and leaving my family's excuses behind? Or should I have tried to make them understand? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Subscribe for more stories like this.